And welcome back to another broadcast with the Star Wars Unlimited Judge Program. As always, I'm Jonah, your program director. Today we're going to be talking about the first two lessons for Level 2, and I am proud to say we're on time. Uh, I'd, I am out of practice doing solo broadcasts. The last half dozen or so, I've always had a guest on, either Tim or somebody else. So me just talking into the wind is I'm gonna have to get used to this again. How's everyone doing today as we get started? I'm gonna burn some time so folks can show up. Folks who are used to me starting maybe a minute or two late can show up. But otherwise, just gonna dive into talking about what is level two, and then talking about that first lesson uh, on game state maintenance and determining responsibility. Mr. Donovan, I am doing very well. I mean, it does help that it's the end of the week. And tomorrow I have the first D&D session with my group in like a month, and so I'm going to finally be able to throw some of those droids behind me at them, and that's going to be a good time. For me, I'm going to have a good time sending close to 100 battle droids against them, and they're going to maybe have a good time fighting 100 battle droids. But as always, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'll be keeping an eye out on that. Otherwise, I'm just going to ramble and talk about judge stuff. Um, Mr. Donovan, yeah, if when we get to lesson two, bring up the question if you can come up with the scenario as we cover material. I'm sure it'll come back to you. Loku667 says droids in D&D. I call it D&D. It's Star Wars TTRPG. It's using a D&D system. It's easier to say D&D in my head. But, right. What is level 2? Level 2 is the next level of judging. But I think the most important thing that I want to impress upon folks with regard to level 2 is that level 2 is not for everyone. As I've talked about a few times, my long-term vision of the program is something like 5,000 L1s and 1,000 L2s and smaller numbers for higher levels from there. But even at that, like, less than 20% of the judge program is going to be level 2. And that's not a comment on skill level or commitment to the game or seriousness about judging or anything like that. It's just where they fit best. The majority of judging and the majority of events, the majority of organized play happens at the local game store level. And the majority of that happens at casual tier. And that's what L1 is designed to prepare you to do. It's designed to prepare you to judge events at your local game store at casual tier. Level 2 is a step beyond that. Either competitive events at your local game store, possibly going to larger tournaments like a sector qualifiers, regional qualifiers, and either acting as a floor judge on one of the large events or acting as like a head judge for some of the casual tier events as side events, for on-demands, for scheduled events, that sort of thing. There is there's a little bit of conflict here in program philosophy. One of the things that I think is important to the long-term health of the program is that judges are always striving to improve, always striving to grow, and being open to always learning and always seeking to reach a higher skill ceiling, a higher skill level. A lot of people will associate that with leveling up and having a bigger number next to your name, but that isn't necessarily true. Plus, the skills that are most important for level 1 judges are prioritized differently at higher levels. One of the most important things that a level 1 judge can do is develop really strong individual bonds with every player in their local community. As a level 1 judge at a local store, you can get to know the 8, 16, 20, 30 players at your store, be on a first name basis with everybody, know which ones are the control players, which ones are the aggro players. When they spoil, I don't know, we're looking around, who's somebody they haven't had as... I mean, when they spoil the next Boba Fett leader, because we're going to get another Boba Fett leader, we're going to get another Fett family member, and they're going to get banned as well. But when another Fett family member is previewed, or like they have a Kanan leader or an Ezra leader, a Grogu leader. Like, if you'll know the person who's like, yes, this is for me. And that sort of familiarity and comfort with your community is not something that is really feasible at the highest level. Like, I have cordial relationships with high level players simply because I've encountered them multiple times in spectacular circumstances. Like, they remember the judge who was their head judge for their first large tournament win that qualified them for regionals or galactics or the equivalent, right? But they don't know my personality, I don't know theirs. And so while we do know each other on some level, we recognize their names, and that's about it. As opposed to knowing what types of decks, what types of games they enjoy, who they are as a person. And so that's what level 1 is. Level 2 can be that, just with a more competitive edge. For level 2, you will be running events with 8, 10, 16, 30 players, but they'll be competitive tier events. They're going to have slightly higher price. Okay, Kevin Jock Jr., did we ever get that definition of a tangent? This isn't a tangent. This is all building to something, right? This is intentional, and I'm aware of what I'm doing. And while the path may be winding, it's still... I haven't left the path, I think. I see you there in the chat. Also, at some point, I should get chat up on the screen so that when this goes to YouTube, YouTube can see all of you roasting me. Because that'll just be a good time. See, this here is a tangent. Anyways, back on the path. Level 2 is for, like, the intro level where I expect most level 2 judges to function is at that local game store, running events primarily by themselves. Maybe with some assistance from, like, a store employee to do deck checks, maybe a level 1 judge to help with deck checks or handle a few calls on the larger side of things. But a 1 to 30 judge-player ratio is I think, perfectly reasonable ratio. It does get a little bit squirrely if you're off doing a deck check, and occasionally there will be 2 calls at a time, so you'll have a little bit of a queue. But at around that number of players, you can generally handle everything yourself. And so you'll be just doing stuff in your store, building your community, and helping your community's competitive aspects grow. Every community is going to... Not every community, but most communities will have some players who are just casual players, who are just happy to be there, happy to be playing the game. And then there are going to be the players who always want to be a little bit more and grinding harder. There are players who are going to want to go to sectors and regionals and galactics. DocLock23 says, I like the way you're clearing this up. I think L2 is for me, but L2 will be the limit because I find more personal joy in running competitive tier events, as things need to be more sharp, but also you can't have everything competitive at that level. Yeah. I think another way to think about it is every level of competitive play isn't for every player. There are many, you'll see that there are plenty of players who show up to pre-release, but don't show up to any other events, weekly plays or showdowns. They just get that most casual, the lowest stakes event of nobody knows what they're doing. We're just here to have fun and play with the new cards. And then you have the players who are like, yeah, I'm going to be at pre-releases. I'm going to be at weekly play. I'm going to show up to showdowns and place middle of the pack and hope to top 8. Like, my goal is top 8ing and winning a showdown. That's my big goal. There are players who are competitive, but they don't see themselves ever traveling for the event. Then you have players who have that same attitude towards PQs of, yeah, I'll go to a PQ in maybe a hour's driving distance, but I'm not going to stay over, like, I'm not going to get a hotel room for a planetary qualifier. I'm not going to stay overnight or anything like that. But they'll go to planetary qualifiers. Then you have the people who are grinding planetary qualifiers, where they're driving 2, 4, 6, 8 hours. They're staying overnight for planetary qualifiers. They're going to every sectors and regionals. Those hardcore grinding players whose goal is to be at every single Galactic Championship. And for judges, there's that same scale. It's just that we put numbers next to them, which makes people feel weird sometimes because they think bigger number means better. And the reason we use numbers is because it's easy to draw associations between a number and an expectation. We could give them titles, but the numbers do give a sense of scale. I have talked about like local judge, area judge, regional judge, global judge, or something like that. And that generally can explain like what each tier is and isn't necessarily as hierarchical as assigning a number to folks, but it's a little bit harder to explain because if somebody's like, okay, what does an area judge do? I'm like, well, they do local competitive events. It's the same thing as L2, but where that is in the expected hierarchy of total skills and total knowledge is a little bit harder to explain. And I think that finding your place is really important. There's a reason I'm talking about this a lot. This is essentially what is important about the judge program, judge levels, is that people feel comfortable in their role in the program and don't feel pressure to always grow. Or not always grow. I do want you to feel pressure to always grow. There's always room for improvement. There's always things you can learn, even at the highest levels. I've been judging for a decade now. I've judged at some of the highest levels available. I've been the head judge of 1,800 player tournaments. I've judged at professional level where the invitation only and the expected value for each of the players was a couple $1,000s minimum pricing, right? Like, I have judged high stakes games. I've also judged events that had 6 players because that's who we got to show up on a Friday night to play some games. And figuring out where you fit is great. But even at those highest level things, I've still been able to grow. I'm still learning. I am still growing as a judge. If you ever think that you have mastered judging and there's nothing more for you to learn, you're wrong. Unless you are some form of artificial intelligence with some degree of omnipotence, because oh boy, there's always stuff you can learn. There's always something that you haven't done, and even if you have done it, there's going to be new technology, there are going to be new rules, there's going to be new policy, there's things that you can learn from other games. I'm going to be adjusting some of my thinking after working with organized play events out in England, because a lot of their experiences with Bandai games, and I have very little experience with that. And they're like, oh, well, we always do that. We've been doing it this way for a decade. I'm like, why have we not tried that? And there's some very interesting ideas that I want to try out. But yeah, so all that is to say, L2 is one place in the program. It's not a stepping stone to a higher level. It might be the end of your numerical progression, but it doesn't mean it's the end of your growth as a judge. There are some really, really impressive judges whose right place, the place where they want to be and the place that's right for them, is at level 1. They love that environment. They love working with players who like that environment, because frankly, the higher up you go in nature of competitiveness, the saltier players can get, simply because the stakes are higher. If you get a bad ruling and the difference is a player loses a game and there's absolutely no difference in pricing because everybody just gets 2 packs for participating, they're going to be a little upset because people like getting correct answers and not incorrect answers. If you make an incorrect call or you make a judgment call and it's correct, or you continue to believe it's correct, but you've ruled against somebody in this judgment call of what actually happened here, that sort of thing, and it costs them a top 8 slot for an event like Galactic Championships, even though that isn't a cash prize event, the prize support for top 8, I mean, if you look at the values of top 8 promos from sector qualifiers, which are going to be more frequent than Galactics, that's real value that we're talking about. And beyond that, it hurts somebody's sense of fairness. If somebody works that hard and they're like, I know that you're wrong, they might not know, they might be wrong, and therefore I deserve to be on the top 8 stage. Like, I don't care about the prizes, I just care about being there because I worked so hard and I deserve it. That player's going to be a little bit more frustrated, and that's understandable. And if that's not something that you're super comfortable with, that's entirely okay. As Mike Stone 12420 says, the conflict resolution level changes dynamically based on people's careers. Yeah. NFL refs are loved by everyone. I don't know if that's true. Premier League refs? See, I'm not huge into sports. I follow them a little bit, very casually. That's not my understanding of refs. But that's something that we as judges, I think it's important that we as judges work on, is the community perception of, oh, Sertar says that they're lying to my face. That makes sense. People, gotcha. It's important that we as judges do our part to be a part of the community. I think one of the most valuable things that you can do as a judge is play in tournaments. And that's because it shows that you are a part of the community. It shows that you understand what it's like to get a warning penalty or to get a game loss, to get deck check and be told that your cards are marked and that's warped and you're not going to be able to play it. Knowing that, I don't know, can we see the curvature of these cards? Yeah, that's apparent. Knowing that experience is really important to players, knowing that the judges know and understand what they're going through. And you can express that through empathy and listening to players and letting their voice be heard. That's hugely important. But level 2 is a community-focused judge that has a more competitive bent than L1. L3 is going to be a little bit more than that. You're going to start to see, as head judge of planetary qualifiers with events of up to 120, 150 players, you're going to start to have players from outside of your local area. It's going to be folks who maybe go to other stores in your city or state or country, or it'll be folks from other regions, from other countries. Folks will start to travel for those 100-player events. They might even get a hotel room or stay overnight at a friend's place or something like that. And so you're going to have people that you've never met before and who aren't invested in the local community, and dealing with that as its whole thing. But that's level 3, not level 2. And I think talking about what level 3 is would be considered a bit of a tangent. So, let's talk. And of course, if anybody has any questions, feel free to drop them in chat. Otherwise, I'm going to keep on talking. Let's talk about the lessons and syllabus. DocLock23 says, it's interesting what you're saying is a pretty US-centric perspective. The experience in Europe is a bit different. I'm curious what you say by that. You have people from other countries show up for showdowns. I think it might be, it differs country by country. I think that, it's really just like a distance thing, right? Like, I think you might have somebody from a half hour away show up for a showdown. But you're probably not seeing folks, taking a flight for a showdown, or staying overnight for a showdown. The other states or other countries is a little bit... That's not a great term, and again, this is one of the challenges running a global judge program. But the general perception for, you will have people travel for showdowns, especially with better pricing. You're going to have more travel for planetary qualifiers, I think, and you're going to have even more travel for sectors and regionals, and you're going to have a lot of people travel for galactics. I say this as somebody who did travel internationally for planetary qualifiers, but Exobyte says, yeah, there's coincidental showdowns, went to one in Belgium, but was just kind of there randomly when it happened. You didn't travel for the showdown. Yeah, we had somebody in Montreal who was just coincidentally there from France for a work trip, and was just and this just happens to coincide with the weekend that there is. It might have been Toronto. It was Toronto, not Montreal. But he was like, oh, there's a planetary qualifier here. Great, I'll do this one. Then I'll go home and I'll have another hometown planetary qualifier and not need to travel more than 10 minutes from where I'm sleeping for either of them. But let's talk about that level 2 syllabus a little bit. So we have on Nexus under lessons a full list of all of the lessons. And you know what I can do? I can just switch to that real fast and show you what the list of lessons is. Nope, I don't have it open. Never mind. But we have a bunch of lessons planned. I think it's currently like 25. Yeah, 25 lessons planned. So what is level 2 is one of them. Game state maintenance and determining responsibilities, another one of them. Common clarifications is scheduled for Monday, but I think we're not going to hit that because I'm probably going to hit, as I mentioned at the end of game state maintenance and determining responsibility, modified actions and nested abilities, and I think that requires its own lesson. Common clarifications honestly might even be 2 lessons, so we're almost immediately out of the gate going to be off schedule from the syllabus just because there's more content that I think is important for level 2 judges. If you take a look at that syllabus, and I can, just drop that in chat so folks can follow along at home, you'll notice that I have scheduled 3 lessons on the CR, 4 lessons on the TR, and 9 lessons on the master event document, and then a handful of lessons. Why do I have 2 copies of Intro to Investigations? That seems wrong. There's some issues with this. I'll take care of it. I'll clean it up. It'll be tidied up. But this syllabus is a rough guideline, a rough outline. I am going to deviate from this schedule. I'm going to deviate almost immediately. Everybody's shocked that we're going on a tangent with the lesson syllabus. But to talk about this, why are there so few lessons on rules? It's because right now a lot of the material is more appropriate for level 1 judges. There's some more niche things that are appropriate for level 2, and there are a few things that are appropriate for level 3. But the game is still young and doesn't have a huge degree of complexity and niche corner cases that you need to know. The rules are simpler than other TCGs, and in a lot of ways are put together very intentionally. Something that happens with older TCGs, ones that have been running, say, 2 or 3 decades, is there's intentionality at the beginning, but they've learned design lessons and are like, oh, those intentions back then, bad intentions, bad design, we're going to fix that. And so there's a lot of architecture holding up old mechanics that don't really work well anymore, or they have, oh, this really neat idea that makes sense intuitively and is very simple, but in the game engine is extraordinarily complex, and we will eventually get there. I mean, piloting is a strong indicator of that. Piloting is something that you can grok relatively easily. You can put a pilot on a ship. That's what it is. But then we read the rules and we're like, hey, can we put a person on a... if we do this, can we move a pilot onto another person? Because the rules say... that stuff can get weird, and as more mechanics come out, it's gonna just get weirder. And so over time, we'll probably add lessons to level 2. We're gonna pull stuff from the mastery quizzes for set updates and add it to L1 to apprentice to L2 as appropriate, especially as mechanics return. I don't think it is appropriate to have L1 and L2 tested on specific mechanics that might not be coming back. So, for example, if we had smuggle, exploit, piloting, those are all mechanics that I am confident will return. I don't have any internal knowledge that says that they will, but they're all very key to the flavor of Star Wars. They all make sense. They're all, I think, generally reasonable mechanics. They're not broken on power level sort of thing. And so they're likely going to come back. But if they don't, I don't think it's relevant to be like, hey, in the year 2029, you're going to need to know a mechanic that's 5 years old. That's not something that I want to have as L1. And so those set specific mechanics aren't going to be tied into level 1 and level 2 until a little bit further on down the track. Kyle the Scout asks, is it coincidental that the L2 exam is scheduled for immediately prior to Galactic Championship or on purpose? That is a coincidence. This is the number of lessons I had. I can maintain a healthy, 1, work-life balance, and 2, good cadence of lessons at 2 a week. Going faster than that causes problems, going slower than that, and I mean, it would take half a year to get through level 2, and that's just not fast enough. As is, it's going to take, I can't do math, close to a little bit over 3 months to get through all of this content. So, just a happy coincidence. And it's very possible as I say, oh, we can absolutely throw in another lesson there, or actually communication doesn't need 2 lessons, I can consolidate it into 1. The schedule and target dates will shift. So, coincidence that it's coming out before Galactic Championships. I frankly might hold the test until post-Galactics, just so that there is time for people to get there. They're not worried about both Galactics and testing at the same time, so that folks don't take the test, fail, and then feel bad about failing and are doubting themselves throughout Galactics. Having that ego boost of I got my certification would be great, but I also don't want players saying, oh, what's your level? Are you a level 2? I know that's available now, and I only want my questions answered by a level 2 judge, because that creates, like, everybody was hired under the same qualifications and under the same conditions, and putting that extra pressure onto people is going to be unfortunate. It also depends on when we get the level 2 endorsement system built in. I'm working with the developer. We have 90% of it built. We just need to add a tag onto tournament organizers and create a system for tournament organizers to earn that competitive TO role, so that they can give out endorsements for level 2, so that when the test becomes available, people can taste that test. Mightstone12420 says roadmaps are great, but construction and traffic affect the trip. Absolutely. As does speed limits. And I'm not going to say that because I'm being recorded right now. But it's unlikely that we'll go faster, but maybe we find a shortcut. Maybe we get routed a way that says, yeah, you can just shave half your distance going this way. That's not going to happen. We're not going to get rid of half these lessons, but 1 or 2 might get consolidated as I'm writing them. Like, clearly 17 and 18 on the list, which both say Intro to Investigations. I can consolidate that, although while we're talking, I remember what that second Intro to Investigations is supposed to be, so I'm going to just go ahead and change that before I forget it. Benny B. Benny 79 says, what is required for the level 2 recommendation? So, it's going to be very similar to the level 1 recommendation. It's going to be a little bit more specific. It's essentially going to say, do you trust that this judge can run a 16 to 32 player competitive tier event? This means, do you trust them to have a little bit more conflict management than you do with somebody who's running casual tier events? A little bit more formalized and professional bearing. The words are, it doesn't need to be terribly long for level 2. I expect it to be a little bit longer than it is for level 1, because level 1 is a little bit more than making sure you have a pulse and are a good person, generally speaking. Level 2, we have a few more requirements, but the literal requirements for what's part of the level 2 recommendation is, do you think this person would be a good fit for running a 32 player competitive tier event? Now, I know that's kind of vague, but it means, can they handle the logistics? can they handle the conflict that comes up as players get frustrated with them or frustrated with rulings. And we'll go into detail. Like, one of the things that I want to do as well is re-architecture the site, because right now, I can't remember if I've talked about this publicly before, but like, this is a site for enfranchised users. Frankly, it is not well laid out. That's because I'm laying down the tracks as we're building the website, and it's, oh, I should put this someplace. That can go into info and resources. If you go to the resources page, you'll note that there's now like 10 different subcategories of stuff that's in here, and unless you know to go to the resources page, you're never going to find anything on this website. So I think what we're going to do eventually is re-architecture this, have a website directory, which is very similar to the resources page is now, a page, like a landing page for certified judges, being like, hey, if you're already a certified judge, here's the things that you care about. Have a page for tournament organizers that gives them lists the tools that they can use, such as the event finder, and talks to them about endorsing judges for various things. And then one for new judges, just like what are the things that you need to do to go from uncertified to certified, and just have a roadmap that people can follow, potentially a checklist that has like links to various resources, just like, here, go watch these lessons, take this exam, get your endorsement, that sort of thing. Fazit says Nexus API. Let me know what you want out of an API, and I can talk to our developer, and if it is reasonable, we can make that happen. I say, promising feature creep for my dev that has not agreed to any of this. Let me know what you want. I can talk to our developer and determine if it's feasible, and then maybe make it happen. But, so yeah, level 2 syllabus, over 20 lessons, a lot of policy from the tournament regulations and the master event document, which is constantly seeing improvements and upgrades and changes, as well as a bunch of logistical stuff, talking about investigations, card counts, disqualifications, running a top 8, running a draft, all sorts of things like that. Some of them are going to get into my opinion a little bit more of just like, what does good and effective mentorship at an event look like? How do you do mentorship outside of an event? How do you write good reviews? Because some level 2s are going to be able to endorse level 1s, and we'll get to that in just a minute. Advancement requirements. So we have a set of 3 requirements, as we do generally. So we have the experience requirement. You have to have judged some competitive Star Wars Unlimited events. They don't have to be official events. They do not need to be planetary qualifiers, sector qualifiers, regional qualifiers. They can include store run events. If a store runs a 1K or a win-a-case or a showcase, or like 8 showcases and they go to the top 8 or something like that. Now you may ask, what is a competitive tier event? If you issue penalties, are you awarding the full penalty points or removing one because it's casual tier? If you're removing one because it's casual tier, then it's casual tier, not competitive tier. The best indicator is if you require deck lists, competitive. If you're not requiring deck lists, casual. So competitive style rather than official competitive. So there are 3 types of there's competitive tier events and casual tier events. Then there are official events, unofficial events, and unsanctioned events. Official events are things that have an event kit or guidelines from FFG. So that is weekly play, pre-release, showdowns, PQs, SQs, RQs, and the Galactic Championship. Those are official events. Then there are unofficial events, which are anything run by a store but is not that is a licensed tournament organizer or an approved tournament organizer, partner tournament organizer with FFG. And so that's most stores running events. If something like Star City Games or Organized Play Events at one of their large multi-game shows runs a Star Wars Unlimited event, that is an unofficial but sanctioned Star Wars Unlimited event. And then unsanctioned is events run by people who aren't officially partnered tournament organizers. And so if your school club runs something, that's probably an unsanctioned event. And when they get to the point where they're doing like points for things, it won't be tracking points, it won't be tracked officially, that sort of thing. Um, so if you are, so you can have official competitive and casual. Official competitive is planetary qualifier and similar. Official casual is pre-release weekly play. You can have unofficial casual, which is just like people playing in the shop for fun, or if they do like a very casual like team trio sort of thing. And they can have unofficial competitive where they're like, this is a 5K, we're going to require deck lists. That's going to be something that would be valid for level 2. And then you have unsanctioned, and you can have unsanctioned competitive events as well. Sertar says requiring lists but removing a point. That sounds like you're making stuff up, because I think it says competitive events use deck lists and casual events have that point change. And mixing the two is you making your own in-between tier of competitiveness. So Fazit says, I thought the only competitive tier events are PQ, SQ, RQ, and Galactic. Those are the only official competitive tier events. But there can be unofficial and unsanctioned competitive tier events, and those are also approved for this. Sertor says, yes, but this is a thing some TOs do. Do we round down competitiveness in those cases? Yes. If you're not meeting the full standard of competitiveness, which is full penalty points and deck lists, it's not a competitive tier event. The reason we require some experience with competitive tier events is because we want you to be experienced with competitive tier events. If you're experienced with full penalty points but no deck lists, or not full penalty points and therefore you're extraordinarily unlikely to get to the point where you're upgrading them, and you do go to a competitive event with that experience, you won't be prepared when those come up. And so it needs to be full penalty points, deck lists, the whole shebang. In addition to that experience, and that 3 number is not set in stone. That's the number we have now. That's the number we're going to be expecting. If I receive feedback that is not a feasible number for people to get before they're able to get to level 2, it's something that could be reevaluated. I know that in a lot of places there can be a little bit of cart before the horse sort of situation, where a store would be like, yeah, we'd be happy to have you come in and do some competitive events for us. You have your level 2 certification, right? And you say, no, I'm trying to get it. I need this experience before I can get it. And they say, well, if you don't have your level 2 cert that says you can do competitive stuff really well, I don't want to hire you. That can be difficult. However, level 2 is not going to be required for competitive events. It's going to be strongly encouraged, and you should be able to get some floor judge experience at smaller competitive tier events as a level 1 judge long term, after you get all of your experience. Kel Rilo says judging a PQ as an apprentice won't count. Nope, it will count. You just need to have that experience in your back pocket. There might end up, like, as long as you've judged 3 competitive tier events for Star Wars Unlimited as a judge, you're good. They can be official, unofficial, doesn't matter. Can be as an L1, can be as an apprentice, can be if you're uncertified. All of those are also fine. It'll, just as the judge program grows, it'll be harder to find opportunities as an uncertified judge as opposed to somebody who's certified, because a tournament organizer picking between 2 people is likely going to pick somebody who's certified over somebody who's not. In time, maybe next year at the earliest, so 2026, there might be some time restrictions placed on this experience. It might be a total of 3 competitive events, with at least one of them being in the last 6 months. So that experience is at least somewhat fresh. I think long term, we won't want somebody who ran 3 planetary qualifiers or judged 3 planetary qualifiers in October of 2024, coming back in 2026 or 2027 being like, okay, I'm ready to take my level 2. I have 3 competitive events even though I haven't touched the game in 2 years. I think some of it will have to be somewhat recent, but it won't all need to be recent. So you don't need to... I want it so that you are actively judging some number of competitive events. That might come in before this is done, but like saying, hey, you need to have judged 3 competitive tier events, and one of them has to have been in the last year, or one of them has to have been in the last 6 months, shouldn't be difficult, at least at this point in the judge program, because everything's been within the last 12 months. Docklock23 says, when do the judge requirements in the levels tab on the Nexus will be enforced for different kinds of events? When we have those levels, and it is reasonable to enforce them. I know that that's not a very solid answer, but we are not requiring, for example, level 3 head judges for planetary qualifiers because they don't exist right now. And if they did exist today, it wouldn't be feasible for the 150 some stores that have events starting in as soon as 2 weeks from now to be able to get a level 3 judge into their store. And so I think it is likely that I think they're starting the Legends of the Force planetary qualifiers will start likely in September if the pattern holds and go over September and October. That's if the pattern holds. Again, no inside baseball here. And I think a month and a half is a reasonable amount of time for folks to find a level 2, and so possibly by Legends of the Force, level 2 head judges will be required, and at that point it might be level 1 floor judges. And then either by Secrets of Power or Set 7 will require level 3 head judges. So the requirements will scale as the program scales and as there are judges who are qualified to meet those requirements. Morden Gaming QC says, not sure if this was announced or something, but at some point will we have a history of an event we judge in our Cascade Game profiles? Could help TO choose when there's more of us. Yep, that is something that we want to do. We are working with one of the things that we want to do is reach out to our friends at Melee and see if there's a way that we can just borrow that event history. So if you're assigned to an event as a judge for a tournament, it just shows up in your Nexus event history that we want to develop. For events prior to that implementation, we'd either have a way for you to be added after the fact, or as a way have a way for judges to manually enter some number of events, particularly for these smaller events, for planetary qualifiers, store showdowns, that sort of thing. I generally believe that we can trust our community to self-report honestly and accurately. For larger events, sector qualifiers and regional qualifiers, we can probably just ask those tournament organizers to provide us a list of emails of certified judges, or like list of emails of judges they had on staff, and then we just assign that event to everybody. But yeah, we want to have event history as a tool. Mightstone12420 says, can we retro award some head judge with the ability to write the tests when available as a check the new endorsement system? I'm not sure what you are asking here. So you can endorse somebody that you have worked with previously. So if you have somebody that you've worked with that you think would be a good level 2 and you're a tournament organizer, you will be able to endorse them after the fact. You don't need to, as soon as the level 2 endorsement is available, a tournament organizer will be able to endorse somebody that they've worked with previously to take those tests. Kel Rilo says, do you sign yourself as a judge on Melee? I haven't been doing that. I haven't been doing that myself, but a lot of the tournament organizers that I work with, I'm working for larger events, and so I'm not on there as the admin. I'm not working in the store, and so I'm assigned as judge staff. And we will, if you have admin access, you'll be able to give yourself that judge role. I know a lot of people are going to care deeply about making sure that their event history is accurate. Something that we might do is for smaller and more frequent events, such as pre-releases and weekly play, is just have a counter, because we don't need to know the exact dates and times of every weekly play you ran. But if you just want to keep track of how many weekly plays, store showdowns, pre-releases, that sort of thing you've done, we can do that. Fazit says, problematic with EU privacy laws. There are ways to share data legally and respectfully, and it's something that we would work with. It would have to be an opt-in sort of situation if we were doing anything automatically, but I think a lot of folks would want that so that they have their event history. Kel Rilo says, I don't have admin, but should I be asking my stores to put me as a judge on Melee? Generally, I think you should, particularly for competitive tier events, because that is how you're able to input penalties. If you want to go to the scorekeeper and tell them what the penalty is, you can absolutely do that. But without that role, you're not going to be able to input penalties, and being able to input penalties is an important part of being a judge. Fazit says, there are ways with regard to data sharing, just a bit of a hassle. Yep. Don't worry, we are well aware of the hassles and protective nature of global privacy laws. We have a lot of experience running face first into them, and it's something that isn't just like, I'm ignoring it. It's, I think, a bridge I can cross. Doclock says, I skipped your show store down concerns. The store showdown requiring an L1 is more the thing I was aiming for, as this can make the future progression of community building problematic, in my opinion. I don't know if that's going to be enforced. I think that's going to be a strong recommendation. The enforcement of levels doesn't come from the judge program. It doesn't come from me. It comes from the publisher, because I don't have a carrot or a stick to incentivize stores with, other than, hey, I have helped train a bunch of wonderful judges who care a lot about judging and the judge program, and they will make your event better. That's your carrot. That's all I can offer. It is up to Fantasy Flight Games to have requirements. If they say you need to have a judge, otherwise we won't let you have more events, that is an FFG decision. And so the timing on that is up to them. I don't know if store showdowns will require an L1 ever. I think that those events, particularly if they BQ a little bit more competitive, should require an L1 judge. But L1, my goal is also to have, eventually, 5,000 level 1 judges. I want to have a level 1 judge in every game store in the world. And I think, like, midterm for the next few years, 2, 3, 4 years, having it be run by apprentices or store employees is totally fine. But it's not a requirement that's coming soon. These requirements will only come, if ever, when the judge program is developed to a point where it's sustainable. So we're not going to say, hey, store showdowns require a level 1 judge next week, because we have fewer than 400 level 1 judges globally, and saying that 4,000 stores that are running Star Wars Unlimited events need a level 1 judge over the next 2 months, that would just make them say, okay, then we're not running events. And we're not going to do that. We're going to build the program, we're going to grow over years, and eventually say, hey, for these events, you should have a level 1 judge. No. These require, like, that chart that I have on there is where we want to end up with the program at the end. It is not something that we are rigidly sticking to. And particularly for casual tier events, it is less critical. It's more of an idea of, if this is what you want to be doing, this is the level you should aim at, sort. Right. So we've talked about experience, endorsement. After you do those, and you can do those in either order or mix and match between the two. You can do an event, get an endorsement, do a couple more events. You can do all of your events, get the endorsement. You can get an endorsement, do all of your events. Doesn't matter. But you'll need both of those before you can do step 3, which is take the exam. I believe the level 2 exam is probably going to be closer to 30 questions, so a little bit longer than L1. I know we're making things harder. Although it does give you, like, each wrong question is individually less impactful, just because there are more questions, but you need to demonstrate a higher level of consistency. And it's going to focus more on policy than rules or logistics, just because that is the focus of the training and education and the role of level 2 over level 1. There's still going to be some rules questions, and some of them are going to take level 1 concepts and push them just a little bit further. So it's not going to just be stuff on the level 2 lessons. There might be questions about stuff on the level 1 exam making their way into the level 2 exam as well. Fazit says, I do think we should try to recruit more judges, maybe have apprentices join events. I would love that. I would love to see more judges. I mean, currently we have globally over 2,000 people who are certified as either apprentices or level 1 judges. And I think the majority of those apprentices would be interested in level 1 if they're able to get an endorsement and pass the exam. I think particularly once we have level 2 judges who are able to endorse level 1 judges and aren't tied to a store, judges who travel a little bit, who are going to do some mentorship or might go from store to store, the number of level 1 judges will jump dramatically. I think this is personal bias here. I think a lot of stores are focused on the health of their personal community, the health of their community, and I understand, like, a tournament organizer isn't going to say, oh, competitor, yeah, send your employee over and I'll endorse them. They're not focused on growing the community outside of their store because it can, like, building up another business's business, costing yourself resources and helping a competitor can hurt you. Although building up, like, a TCG community in an area and so everybody goes to every store, that works for you, but that's a lot more work coordinating with other businesses. But judges, I think a lot of them are motivated by their desire to help people and to teach people. A lot of what you do as a judge is help people and teach people. And so I think there will be a lot of level 2 judges who will say, okay, my community's an okay place, but I'm the only level 2 judge. We have one level 1 judge half an hour away and a handful of apprentices. Let me run some, like, study classes, some study sessions in my LGS after pre-release. Let me, like, have people run events and I play in them so I can observe them and write endorsements. I think as we get L2s who can endorse level 1s, the number of L1s is going to increase because the accessibility to those endorsements is going to increase. Speaking of level 1 endorsements, I know I've been saying for a while level 2 judges can endorse level 1 judges. That's mostly true. You will have to be level 2 in order to endorse level 1, but not all level 2 judges will be able to endorse level 1 judges. This is because I want to make sure that folks who are endorsing level 1 judge candidates are doing so correctly. I want to make sure that there is some demonstration of understanding of judge program philosophy. I want to make sure that the judges who are bringing new people into the community aren't... there are some judges who get into judging for righteous justice and punishing players and aren't a good fit for the community and culture that we're trying to build. And requiring every single L2 to go through an additional process that not all of them are going to take advantage of and isn't core to the job of running these competitive tier events. That making everybody do work that they don't want to do makes people just not do any of the work. And so we got rid of the requirement for everybody doing this work, and we're putting it solely as an additional certification, a bonus tag for level 2 judges who want to grow the community and who have that right attitude. Now, the vast majority of level 2 candidates, this is going to be a good fit for it. So many people care. So for that, it's going to be write a couple of reviews. It'll either be submit one really good review, or it's probably going to be 2 other reviews of other judges. And what I'm going to be looking for in those, and I'm going to have articles on this and descriptions on this in detail, is are you able to evaluate the strengths and weaknesses of a judge? Can you identify where they need to grow and how they can grow? Can you identify what they're doing well? Can you help build somebody up? Can you identify whether or not they're a good culture fit? And part of it is also understanding your evaluation. Are you able to identify where they are relative to the expectations for a level 1 judge, or even a level 2 judge? The reviews don't need to be of level 1 candidates. They can be of apprentices. They can be of experienced level 1 judges. They can be of level 2 judges. They can be of level 3, 4, or 5 judges. It's just write 2 reviews. But it's important to know that you can evaluate somebody and compare them to a bar. It might be, I need 2 written documents from you. It might be 2 reviews or 1 review and like a paragraph. Like, I'll put a word cap on it. I don't want people writing massive essays that take me a half hour to read. It might be like a tweet's length of what makes a good level 1 judge. That might be all that I need for this sort of thing. And then when eventually we get to level 3, it will require having this certification, because mentorship becomes a much more integral part when you're leading folks more regularly. Level 2 judges aren't necessarily leading folks. Level 2 judges are often lone warriors as the only judge at an event, and so don't necessarily have to have as much experience with mentorship. As a level 3 judge, you're going to be expected to be leading teams of 2 to maybe 4 judges and providing mentorship and guidance and feedback, even in a small way, just in moment to moment, is going to be a general expectation for that level. And so having this mentorship and level 1 endorsements, checkmark or badge or certification in your hand is going to be required probably for level 3. Sertar says, can we refer you to our ACES general app? You can Control-C, Control-V, or Command-C, Command-V, or hold down, click copy, hold down, click paste. Loco667 says, do you really want to read 2 reviews per aspiring L2? That will be a lot of reading. I like reading a whole lot, but I think that this is important and worth my time. And frankly, the reason it's not required for every L2 and is an optional bonus thing is to slow the rate at which it occurs. If I was like, this is required for level 2, I know that the day the test was available or in the weeks leading up to it, I would get 100 or 200 or 300 or 400 reviews to read, and I would not be able to keep up with all of them. And I would feel really bad for not being able to keep up with them and preventing folks from advancing when they have everything else done and all it is me reading it. Because I don't just want to read them and say, yes, this is fine. I want to read them and provide a sentence or 2 of feedback and personal guidance, which I know I've said many times, and I'm taking off my glasses for this because it's not my job to individually mentor every single one of you, but boy howdy am I gonna try. Because if I'm saying no, I don't think that you have what it takes to, like, this thing that you're doing doesn't meet the bar, I'm gonna need, like, at the very least I'm gonna have a rubric that I'm grading you against. But I'm not going to tell you exactly what that rubric is, because then you'll just ChatGPT it up or hit the points yourself, and it won't be an organic, real representation, although there will be some guidance of this generally what I'm expecting. Anyways, by having it be an optional thing that isn't tied directly to L2 and requires you being an L2 first, people will get their endorsement, take the exam over a period of time, and that'll slow the rate at which these come in. And if I don't respond to it immediately, it doesn't feel as bad because it is a bonus thing. And then, honestly, yeah, I'm genuinely really excited to read a bunch of reviews. One of my favorite things to do is hear about feedback judges have for other judges that they are delivering to that judge. Feedback is my favorite thing in the judge program. I like it more than rules. I like it more than policy. I like it more than logistics. Helping people grow is why I pushed so hard in judging, which helps me in this position. But no, I'm really excited to do a lot of reading. Just like there might be some word limits eventually, or if I'm reading something and you're like, here's a 10-page review I wrote of this person after working with them for 2.5 years, I'll read it, and after like half a paragraph I'll be like, perfect, this is great, you have nailed it, I don't need to read the rest of it, here's your check mark, you now have the certification. I will, I think, be able to determine if you have that je ne sais quoi of understanding how to give good feedback or even reasonable feedback within half a page. So I'm not going to be reading essays and tomes unless they're really good. One of the things that I've done in other judge programs that I've worked for, I read self-reviews for folks who were aspiring for the highest level in that judge program, the equivalent of 5 in ours. And working with people on, like, people would come in and be like, so this is where I'm struggling with investigations, this is where I'm struggling on leadership, conflict management, and being like, okay, I've read your self-evaluation, here are things that I think you can do, here are people or resources, like articles that you can read, people that you can talk to, roles that you can ask for at events that'll help you grow. That was far and away my favorite thing, was reading. It wasn't the reading, it was the helping people grow. Fazit says, can the review be of myself? Good question. No. It's gotta be 2 other judges. Yeah, it even says in the lesson, I thought this one through. It says, the reviews must be have written of other judges. Now, you can write a review for yourself, and I encourage you to do so. Self-evaluation is hugely valuable, and having it, like, a lot of people are like, no, I think about my performance all the time, I have imposter syndrome, I stay up late thinking about all the things that I've done wrong. That is self-evaluation, very good. Writing it down means that, like, a year later, or 2 years, or 9 or 10 years later, you can go back, read that review, and be like, wow, I thought I was very good then, and I was not. Good to see that I've gotten better. But you can see growth in those words rather than just, like, having it on vibes. Gentle Giant says, 303 says, are you saying you don't like reading? No, I am saying that I like reading, possibly too much. Loco667 says, where in the leveling process will self-reviews come in? I think it will likely, I don't know, is the short answer. At the highest levels, certainly. Self-evaluation is very important when you are going to be the most experienced person in the room. The ability to evaluate your actions for areas of improvement when everybody else in the room is less experienced than you is super important for continued growth and avoiding slumps or stagnation. And so I think for levels 4 and 5, almost certainly. I think for level 3, possibly. But it's tough. But getting people into the habit of writing self-evaluations would be great. It's also possible that this is a little bit of a tangent. We're talking about level 3 now. One of the requirements for level 3 will be to write a tournament report. This is because something that, as a level 3 judge, you're more likely to need to do is write a disqualification report. With the 16-player event, while you may have cheaters, and cheaters do occur on the local level, it is much more likely that you will have somebody who's not an invested part of the community, somebody who is visiting for a single event like a planetary qualifier, and with 10 times as many players, you're much more likely to have a cheater and have an investigation. But as a level 3, as a head judge of planetary qualifier or similar events, you are much more likely to need to write a disqualification report and a disqualification statement. And writing a tournament report is much of the same skill. It is talking about what happened, why it happened, how you evaluated things. And so talking about calls, that demonstration of how you can communicate what happened is going to almost certainly be a requirement for level 3. It's possible that that tournament report can be a stand-in for, like, it might be write a tournament report that covers some number of calls and your personal growth, or write like a self-review and write an article covering some interaction or something along those lines. Balancing the demonstration of ability to explain the events of a judge call and evaluating personal growth and growth of other judges. These are all things that I want to see happen. However, I don't want the judge program to be a writing contest. I don't want it to be limited strictly to judges who are comfortable writing. I know that a lot of folks are not comfortable writing. I know that I am, and so I have a tendency to be like, yeah, we can just make everybody just write everything all the time. And that doesn't lead to a healthy program. I want to have alternatives. it might be that, like, rather than writing a tournament report, you have a debrief with a higher level judge. So if you're interested in being a level 3 head judge, you need to have a debrief with a level, like, having a Zoom call or like a Discord call with a level 4 higher judge, and just talking about your event and having a verbal debrief rather than writing it down, that might be acceptable. Similarly, like, just doing a public broadcast, being like, hey, instead of writing down my tournament report, I'm just going to stream and talk about my tournament experience. Writing articles or creating, like, study guides can be used instead of demonstrating that you know the rules in some ways. Like, I want to create accessibility tools. At the beginning, it's probably just going to be write a bunch and Jonah's going to read a bunch, because that is the simplest tool to create. We already have the tools on Nexus to have somebody submit a piece of writing and have it be a check mark for any sort of checklist. Having somebody, like, submit, like, a YouTube video or a Twitch stream broadcast, we don't have the technology for that, and developing the technology for that and, like, analyzing it, that's a whole nother beast. Benny B. Benny says it could be kind of hard to get those 3 competitive experiences here in Germany. Most stores don't offer any judging positions for planetary qualifiers if you aren't directly organizing it with them, and there aren't many more competitive tier events. So this is one of the challenges with developing judge programs. There are regions that are underserved with competitive events, and consequently it is hard to get experience for those competitive events. For example, if you want to be a level 4 or level 5 judge, you're going to need experience at sectors, regionals, maybe even galactics, right? Probably, I don't know if I'll require galactics for level 5, but it's a possibility. But, like, you're going to need experience at those high-level, large events. And if you're not from Europe or the United States, right now sectors and regionals have only been in Europe and the United States. If you're from South America, where there have been planetary qualifiers, if you're from Australia, where there have been planetary qualifiers, or South Africa, planetary qualifiers there, Taiwan, China, planetary qualifiers have been there, you would need to fly to a different continent to get that experience, because it's not available in your local area. And one of the challenges is that judges, you may want more than what your local community can sustain. If you want to be a competitive tier judge, but there aren't competitive events around you that need judges, then, and you're not willing or able to travel, then unfortunately you're not able to get that practical experience. But also, if you're not getting that, like, if those events don't exist, what do you need that certification for? I know that it can be helpful for traveling to larger events. Like, if you want to get onto sectors or regionals, having a higher number next to your name would be helpful, absolutely. But something that will come up is people will be like, I'm in my area, there are no events that can get me to this level. And so I can't level up. And it's like, okay, those events are the only ones that require that level. So what you have covers the events that are in the area that you're able to travel to. It is definitely a little bit of a catch-22 if you want to travel further. It's something I'm aware of, but as it grows and as we get more judges and as the program is stronger and FFG gets more comfortable with organized play, they might start requiring certain numbers of certified floor judges. It might be you need a level 3 head judge and at least 2 level 2 floor judges and a total of 1 judge for every 40 players. or every 30 players. And then if they're running a 120 player tournament and they don't have certified judges, they will need to find external certified judges. I'll talk with FFG about enforcing judge count in addition to judge level, because I know that some stores will be like, oh, we need to hire a level 3 head judge and everybody else needs to be level 2. Okay, we will hire a level 3 head judge and 0 level 2s and meet your requirements, and then run a terrible event. And they'll be like, hey, our event was terrible even though we met your requirements. And we'll be like, okay, we want to give you some flexibility, some lateral movements so you could staff your event adequately. You need these numbers. I hear that concern. And if the events simply aren't happening that require the level, that's not really something that I can change. If it is stores understaffing events, that's something that I can talk with FFG about, with getting something stronger than recommendations, because right now it is a recommendation, and it is a very aggressive recommendation of 1 judge per 20 players. I think Star Wars Unlimited can judge happily at 1 to 40, maybe even a little, maybe 1 to 45. But okay, so I've been talking for a little over an hour. Yeah, a 1 hour stream. That's what I said. Let's go to the second half of this 1 hour stream. Let's swap over. Well, I'm going to keep on chatting for a second. But if anybody has any questions. Yes. Mr. Donovan says, if I want to run my LGS's Win a Carbonite tournament in a few weekends as a competitive tier event, how would that differ from a casual tier? Is it a matter of doing deck checks and harsher penalties? Essentially, yes. Make sure that the tournament organizer, if it's you, great. If it is somebody else, talk to them. And the player community are on board with that. Some players will want to be... they'll want it to be a more casual event because that's what they're comfortable with. So just talk with your community and make sure that it is something that folks are happy with. Again, if there are any other questions before we move on to advanced core rules and game state maintenance, toss them in the chat. Also, on Nexus, under resources, we do have a bunch of regional communities listed. I don't have a Germany-based regional community. If you want to send that my way, I can add that to the list of regional communities so folks can join it. I know that we have some Facebook groups, some WhatsApp groups, mostly Discord, but it doesn't have to be Discord as long as it's an online community and you want more people to join it. I can help host that and get people into it. So, let us talk about advanced core rules, including game state maintenance and determining responsibility. So, as we go into level 2, as I mentioned in the previous lesson, or while covering the previous lesson of what is level 2, there's some stuff in the CR that's a little bit more complex and nuanced and niche that you don't need to know for everyday judging. It also doesn't help that this stuff was added in Twilight of the Republic, and so would not have been possible for me to include in the level 1 lessons, but this content of game state maintenance and determining responsibility generally is intuitive enough that I would say probably 99% of players are unaware that it exists entirely, because they just intuited the rules, which is great. Having the rules be what players do intuitively is where you want the rules to be. However, because these rules exist, sometimes some things that are a little counterintuitive can come up. Great. I gotta say, I had a lot of fun with this lesson. Just with the cards. Normally I put a card on that I talk about on the page, but I added a little bit of spice here. This one is Shield Generator Complex because these things can get complex. Get it? I'm so funny. Anyways, you don't all need to laugh at once. We're gonna just talk about a variety of things. Starting with maintaining the game state. So, a lot of what the game does is what players do. Players take actions. They say, I'm going to use this ability. I'm going to attack that unit. Then there are things that occur automatically but are visible. Triggered abilities, delayed effects, lasting effects, super laser technicians. When defeated, no player is saying, okay, this is going to trigger now. It's the game rules saying this is triggered now. And so that happens automatically. Game rules also make checks to ensure that everything is good. If a unit has damage on it, it needs to die. No card says that. The rules say that. The rules say things have to proceed as I want them to. Right now we have, I believe, 5 steps here, and they happen in a specific order. Because if they don't happen in this order, things that the designers don't want to have happen. And so this is one of those things where the way you learn it is you memorize the order. There is some ability to memorizing the order here. I'm generally going to avoid saying, just memorize it. It's always going to be understand the ideas behind it. But as I'll say later in the message, this order is semi-arbitrary. It's, we want these things to happen, and therefore, we want these things to happen in this order, therefore they happen in this order. Whereas other things are, this is how this mechanic works. This is how triggers work. And it's a little bit arbitrary, but they're generally more common. Like, ordering triggers on the stack, there are a couple different ways that could have happened. But the active player choosing, that's what was chosen. But it happens so frequently that it's not something that you need to memorize, and it is one fact. This is a set of 5 things in a particular order. So let's go over them. McFerguson, what is a stack? It's a programming term. And that, I'm just going to leave it at that. Go to Stack Overflow, and it'll explain what a stack is. So, maintaining the game state. First thing that we check for is, we're constantly checking for these. If a player's base has 0 remaining HP, that player loses the game. This sequence of game state maintenance is either like a sequence of checks made on a checklist and you just go down the list and then you start at the top of the list and go down it again, or you can think of it as a system of priority where as soon as soon as a warning light goes on, you hit whack-a-mole with it. Step number 2, uniqueness. If a player controls 2 or more copies of the same unique card, they must choose and defeat one. Remember that game state maintenance occurs before triggers, so something like Admiral Trench would be able to return another Admiral Trench that was defeated through uniqueness. Similarly, if it is Admiral Yularen, which says whenever you play a command unit, including this one, heal your base for 1. With that, you play one, you play a second one, both will trigger because the trigger condition has met, but we won't be resolving it until we finish dealing with uniqueness. So, triggers can happen before the game state is maintained because the trigger condition has been met, but before they resolve, we have to resolve the game state. If an upgrade is in play and not attached to anything else, it's defeated. It's just floating out there in the ether. It'll fall to the ground and go to your discard pile. That one is nice and straightforward. If a unit is guarding a captured unit, if a unit guarding a captured unit has left play, the captured unit or units are rescued. The guarding unit can be defeated, captured itself, or returned to hand as examples of unit leaving play. Then, if a unit has 0 remaining HP, it is defeated. It can have 0 remaining HP due to printed stats. If you play clone with nothing to copy, if it has damage marked on it, it has negative HP modifiers, or it has damage on it and an upgrade and it loses the upgrade. All of these things are things that kill units. This is one that you're probably pretty familiar with and don't need me explaining as much. So, let's talk about this little example. The active player controls a Supreme Leader Snoke. non-active player controls a battlefield Marine. The Marine is getting -2/-2. It's a 1/1. Active player plays a second Supreme Leader Snoke. Battlefield Marine is now getting -4/-4. It is a -1/-1. What happens to the Battlefield Marine? If you've seen the lesson, you already know the answer to this, and you might already know the answer to this, but we're going to just go over it real fast anyways. We're going to go through these steps. Step number 1, we have 2 unique units. So we defeat one of them. We get rid of it. We go down the list. We have... Does any unit have 0 less remaining HP? No, we don't. We don't have to worry about it. Battlefield Marine, totally fine. Probably just, like, not wearing his glasses or something along those lines. I just have now there are 2 of them on here because now there are 2 Snokes. This is not a play anybody would make, but it's a cute little thing. Great. We move on to the next one. Hey, look, this is the explanation of the answer. Same images. Now we have another one. Warzone Lieutenant has an academy training for damage on. How is this processed? Again, I'm going to give you a second to think of your answer, or drop it in chat if you want to before I start talking. But we'll talk about how this plays out in just a second. Great. So we go through this. No bases, no unique units. We do have a floating upgrade. Or we don't have a floating upgrade. We have an upgrade, but it's attached to a unit, so it's totally fine to stay there. Nothing needs to be rescued. The Warzone Lieutenant leaves, goes away. Then the academy training leaves. This is relevant sometimes for last known information. If you're looking at, for example, how much power a unit had when it was in play, the upgrade was still attached to it. It's not like... I'm not sure how you would consider the academy training leaving before the Warzone Lieutenant, because it's attached first. But you have to go through those things a second time for the academy training to be dropped off. Now, we can get a little convoluted. This one, we're just going to say 97th Legion a whole bunch. But really this example of having a 97th Legion capture a 97th Legion, defeating one of them, it just shows that we're going through this process over and over and over again until everything is taken care of. This is... Physite says just a little... Yeah, this one is not terribly convoluted, because 97th Legion isn't modifying the power and toughness of any other units and causing them to be defeated. For example, if there's a unit that says this unit gets +1/+1 for each unit you control, and then units are dying because of that while we're processing uniqueness or capturing, and units are coming back, and so that last unit's power or HP is increasing and decreasing, and it should die multiple times during the process, depending on choices made, could be a little fun. But before we move on to determining responsibility, actually, no, we're going to talk about determining responsibility, and then we're going to go do a quick overview of both of these. So, determining responsibility. Sometimes you need to know who defeated a unit. This is primarily for bounties in multiplayer games to determine who gets to collect the bounty, or for card abilities like if you defeated a unit this phase. Broadcast is saying connecting to chat. I hope I didn't drop any frames. Let me know if I disappeared for a second, and I can just start over from wherever I left off. But in the meantime, I'm going to keep on chatting. Sorry, so, sometimes you need to know who defeated unit. If a player is directly instructed to defeat a unit, they are responsible for defeating it. This includes coming from game rules, like uniqueness, or a card ability. Note that it is a direct instruction to defeat. Something like damage is not an instruction to defeat. The card is simply defeated, and that's covered by another step in this process. So, if something didn't say defeat a unit, we move on to the next slide. Slides, why aren't we moving on? There we go. So, If it's not directly defeated, it is the player who controls the card that dealt damage is responsible. It can be direct damage like open fire, it can be combat damage, it can be indirect damage. The player whose effect created the damage, or the card that created the damage, is responsible for the card being defeated. If it's not that, then it is the player who controls the card that generically defeats a unit is responsible for those units being defeated. So something like Takedown or Power of the Dark Side explicitly instructs, like, makes a choice, defeats a unit. Actually, not Power of the Dark Side. I think Power of the Dark Side falls into this category, not the instructed to defeat. Super Laser Blast just defeats a bunch of stuff generically. It's not you pick a specific unit, but it still came from your card, so you're responsible. Next, we have lasting effects expiring and modifying HP. If the unit is defeated during regroup or when a lasting effect expires, no player defeated that unit. This is the only way that a unit can be defeated with no player being responsible. So if you want to commit war crimes and get away with it, you give all of your units a temporary buff, then give your opponent a Supreme Leader Snoke, then you deal damage to your units, then the temporary effect wears off, they all are defeated, but they are defeated due to the lasting effect expire, and so you're not responsible. So, little silly. Fazit says, can we go a little more in-depth on the difference between the first and third points? Yeah, so let me pull up the comprehensive rules real fast, so that I can read the words in the document rather than trying to say them from memory. So, the first is, players are always responsible for defeating units they are directly instructed to defeat, such as when resolving an ability that says choose a unit and defeat it, or when resolving the uniqueness rule. So that is something like Vanquish, Rivals Fall, the uniqueness rule as mentioned. Power of the Dark Side, by its wording, an opponent chooses a unit they control, defeat that unit. That is a direct instruction. The card says defeat that unit. That is a direct instruction and falls under 18.1. 18.1b is, if the above does not apply and a unit is defeated by an ability controlled by a player, that player is considered to have defeated that unit. So Super Laser Blast does not specify a particular unit, but it is defeated by that ability. So the difference is Super Laser Blast, generic, whereas the others are specific. That is my understanding of this difference. I can also, that's my best understanding. That is Merciless. Let me check Merciless. Because I need... Merciless Contest is each player chooses a non-leader unit they control, defeat those units. I think that would fall under 18.1 and not 18.1b. But again, that is my understanding of this. Right now, I think it is only for those generic, like, really just Super Laser Blast. Does that help explain? Yeah, Merciless and Power of the Dark Side both have a choose, then defeat that unit. Super Laser Blast is different because it is defeat all units. That is my understanding. If there is a choice, it is 18.1. If it's not a choice, it is 18.1b. But I can ask for clarification on the distinction between the two of those. Hibidino says, what if there's an enemy Snoke, but the unit is not defeated until a lasting effect expires? So this is a tangent from the defeat question. So we go through the steps, right? Step 1, were you directly instructed to defeat it? No. So we ignore that. Unit is defeated because of damage dealt by a unit player controls. That's not happening. Unit is defeated by ability controlled by a player. Again, no. 18.1c. Unit is defeated during regroup phase or when a lasting effect expires. No player is considered to have defeated that unit. No players, like, that is what's happening here. Even though Supreme Leader Snoke is modified. So, if you go Moment of Glory on Warzone Lieutenant, then I play Supreme Leader Snoke, and then Moment of Glory wears off, and the Warzone Lieutenant is defeated, then it is defeated because of the lasting effect wearing off, and no player defeated that unit. If instead it's Warzone Lieutenant, and then I play Supreme Leader Snoke with no Moment of Glory in between, I, by playing Supreme Leader Snoke, have defeated the Warzone Lieutenant. There is some weird language in here about in 18.1 D, which says the most recent player whose ability or effect changed the remaining HP of that unit is considered to have defeated that unit. And that includes positive modifications, which I don't think it does. If you played something that, like, if you played an upgrade after damage was dealt to it or something along those lines, and then, like, there was a lasting effect, like, it gets... Oh, and then, so you play an upgrade on something, the unit takes damage, and then the upgrade is defeated. You are technically the player whose ability, I think, changed its power most recently, and that's weird from giving it a buff. Anyways, Curse Strife says, is the Snoke player considered to be the controller of Snoke's ability? Yes, you control the constant abilities of cards that you control. Sertar says, does the expiry of moment count as having the most recent change? So it would, however, that is preceded in this sequence by 18.1c, and so we don't get to 18.1d. Does that make sense, Sertar? So, like, it doesn't matter if Moment of Glory is the most recent effect that changed the remaining HP of a unit, because it is a lasting effect, and the lasting effect takes precedence. McFerguson, you didn't quite catch what was said about, but something sounded weird, if there's a choice involved. We were discussing the difference between the line in 18.1, where players are responsible for defeating units they are directly instructed to defeat, versus 18.1b, which is a unit is defeated by an ability controlled by a player. That player is considered to have defeated that unit. Those sound very similar, and the difference that I am able to discern is the choice in 18.1 as opposed to no choice in 18.1b. But honestly, that is one that I'm not 100% on. But if we go through defeat, damage, defeat again, expiry, modification, and we still haven't figured out who defeated the unit, the active player is considered to have defeated that unit. Now, I also can't come up with a scenario where we get to 18.1e. So we'll see where that is. McFerguson, you were positive that Power of the Dark Side and Merciless Combat go to 18.1b. That's possibly true. It may... otherwise, Power of the Dark Side could never trigger a Bravado. No, it would... Power would always... Because, like, you're... So what I was saying is, because you control Power of the Dark Side or Merciless Combat, while you aren't making the choice to defeat that card, there's still a choice being made, and so it falls under 18 1 instead of 18-1B. As long as an enemy unit is defeated by that, you are the one defeating it. And I think that might fall under 18-1. It might fall under 18-1B. But in any case, this language could do with some refining. Physique, even if the opponent makes a choice, it was your effect that cost it. Yeah, exactly. So that might be the distinction that's in play there, as your choice versus you're not making a choice, but it is still your card. Generally, though, if your card says defeat a unit, you're the one responsible for defeating that unit, even if it's not your unit. And if you can come up with a scenario where we get to 18-1E, I'd be fascinated to hear what it is. But, wrapping up. So, as I was saying at the top, these two areas are both things that are kind of fall into the rote memorization category. It's, if you get a question about, hey, which of these happens first, it's not something that you're necessarily going to be intuitive. And so memorizing bases, uniqueness, upgrades, rescue units, and direct instruction, damage, defeat abilities, effects expiring, HP modification, active player is probably your best bet at understanding these. Right now, I don't have a little clever acronym for these other than BURU and DDD-EHA. Again, those aren't good acronyms. Like, please, I'm not going to ask you not to do something because you will. So come up with a better one. I dare you. But that about covers everything. Both of these are niche and don't come up super often. They come up more frequently with niche cards. And less common interactions, and so they may feel less relevant, but as the game grows and gets more complex, these questions will become more common, and memorizing particular interactions, like the double Snoke interaction does not result in a -4/-4, can work in the short term, but in the long term, understanding how the game state is maintained by the game itself means that when there's another question, you will have a better understanding of what it is, and you'll know that answer without having to learn the interaction because you already know the fundamental rules. Alright. Does anybody have any final questions before I get out of here? We're clocking in an hour and a half, which is not too bad for a 1-hour show. As always, I like to be chatty. I want to thank you all for joining me. We'll be back on Tuesday with our next broadcast covering modified actions and nested abilities, which I'm sure will be a delight and straightforward, and nobody will have complicated questions. Benny B. Benny 79, I've missed the stream where the next set of judge programs was announced. Is the shipping situation for EU judges better this time? Short answer, no. To be frank, I'm going to swap back to my face so you can see how happy I am about this. Short answer is no. We don't have a better solution. In part because our partner for the first wave has most of our physical product. They don't have the next wave of promos, but they have like the deck boxes and things, and getting that out of their warehouse is significant. The most effective way of getting that out of their warehouse is shipping it directly to the end customer. We are aware of the many frustrations that occurred with that first wave of merch, and with the slower approach to the second wave, with pretty much every L1 having that opportunity, having a week to make that purchase, you should be aware of the final price. And if there's an issue, it's not, I have 10 seconds to make this decision or else it's sold out. It's, I have a week, say, hey, I have an issue, I want to buy it, but this price is insane, what are you doing, just ship this way instead. And you'll either be able to reach out to Tim directly at tim@cascadegames.com or to Tier 1 and have a conversation with their team before clicking buy. You would have a whole week to bring up issues before there's a rush. And if there are issues, we can push back that purchase window on apprentices a little bit, so that we can make sure that every L1 who wants to buy a kit has the opportunity to buy the kit. I hope that with less time pressure, we're going to be able to get better prices on shipping for you. However, I know that given the state of the global economy, total price paid for products is not necessarily what it says, particularly when you first purchased it. We ordered the playmats for this kit before the tariffs came in, and we got them after the tariffs came in, and that's when you pay for the tariffs. And so some of the things were slightly more expensive than we had budgeted for, but we're eating that, essentially. We're not gonna charge tariffs are not great for small businesses, but we're also aware that shipping and VAT in Europe last time was beyond what is acceptable. There's a reason we have been looking for a new shipping partner since then, but we're not able to have it for this set of shipment. But given that we have more time, I think that we will hopefully be better able to handle concerns. With that, thank you all so much. McFerguson, I'm ignoring your question on purpose. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful evening, everyone. Or morning. I don't know where you are. Have a good one.